From 1100 to 1500, about half of the people living in medieval castles felt temperatures so cold that they could see their breath while sleeping inside. Stone walls were 10 feet thick in some spots, pulling in the cold like magnets and spreading it through every room. While we grumble when our heating drops below 68 degrees, these individuals faced the threat of freezing to death in their own beds, with no thermostat anywhere around. How did anyone manage to sleep in what were basically cold stone boxes? Imagine facing the biting cold within the stone walls of a medieval castle every night. Before we begin, if you often drift off to these, please give a thumbs up or subscribe. I'm interested to know where you're all tuning in from, so please share your location and the current time. It's interesting to picture some of you enjoying breakfast in Tokyo, while others are settling down for sleep in Chicago. Okay, let's go back to medieval Europe. Believe me, it's going to be an interesting journey. But first, make yourself at home. Go ahead and fluff those pillows. Tuck in that blanket, because where we're headed, you'll want to feel snug. You awaken to a world of shadows. For a moment, you feel a bit lost. Where are you located? Then it dawns on you. It's the year 1320, and you find yourself waking up in a stone room of Warwick Castle in England. The first thing you notice isn't what you see. It's the chill in the air. A chill so intense it seems to rise from within your very bones. The cold air stings your lungs with every breath. Your breath appears in the air, floating like a gentle morning mist. This isn't just a little problem. This is the type of cold that can be deadly. The servant grumbles. It's so cold. As he attempts to relight the fire that went out hours earlier, his fingers feel rigid, struggling to hit the flint. Unlike your cozy bed at this moment, where the biggest challenge is just a bit of a cold bathroom floor in the morning, this chill is always there, waiting. The issue is with the stone. The same material that helped castles stand strong for protection also made them really bad at keeping warm. And we're not referring to narrow stone walls either. The walls at Warwick, a visiting mason once shared, are 10 feet thick in some areas. Solid stone that absorbs the cold like a sponge and keeps it for days. Stone not only allows the cold in, it also fights against you. It takes in the cold air from outside and spreads that chill throughout the inside areas. It's like a big cold battery that holds the chill and gradually lets it flow into your home. Not the best. You sit up in bed, feeling a jolt as your bare feet meet the cold stone floor. It's similar to walking on ice. Your medieval morning isn't off to a good start. And it's about to take a turn for the worse as someone knocks loudly on the door. My lord, the guard at the eastern wall says riders are coming. And just like that, you must step away from the warmth you've built up overnight. Because that's how it is with castles. They were made for battle, not for relaxation. Medieval castle designers focused on one main goal: staying safe from invaders. Keeping warm was not a priority, coming in after the striking towers and great spots for archery. Consider those arrow slits. They were great for shooting at foes, but also let in chilly drafts. The tall ceilings that let smoke drift up also made for huge areas that were hard to warm up. A historian once told me that the Great Hall at Warwick could hold 3 modern houses. How can you warm something that big using only wood and coal? You simply accept the chill. Hold on, it either improves or declines, depending on your perspective. The design of many castles turned the cold issue into an enjoyable challenge. Spiral staircases linked various levels, forming ideal pathways for the wind. Open courtyards let the wind and snow flow right into the heart of the castle. And if you were fortunate, the windows might have wooden shutters. Real glass was uncommon, and used only in the richest castles, and even then just in a handful of rooms. A blacksmith once told me that my grandfather served at Windsor Castle while he was working on some hardware for the castle. It was said that even in the king's chambers, the drafts were so strong they could blow out candles. If the king was unable to get away from the cold, think about how it felt for everyone else. Imagine this. You are the lord of the castle, enjoying the finest comforts. Your bedchamber is located in a tower room. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? No, because while heat does rise, towers extend from the main building, which means they are exposed to cooler air on 3 sides. Your elegant tower room is like a medieval icebox. Imagine the tower room at Kenilworth Castle in winter. The stone walls are damp with condensation, and the tapestries sway gently as the wind slips through the cracks. The metal hinges on the door are so cold they feel like ice against your skin. This was what luxury living looked like in medieval England. A castle guide once shared with me during a private tour that the real killer is the dampness. It wasn't just cold. It was a wet cold, the sort that seeps into your joints and lingers on. He wasn't exaggerating. Medieval castles were often built near water for defense. This meant fog, mist, and damp air were always present. Stone absorbs moisture, and that moisture made the cold feel even more intense. The chill of a medieval castle in December is far more penetrating than modern cold. So this was the reality. Cold stone floors that felt icy underfoot, walls that seemed to chill the air, strong drafts that made flames flicker, damp air that left everything feeling moist, and long winter nights stretching 14 to 16 hours. Essentially, a perfect setup for hypothermia. You're curious about how anyone made it through, aren't you? An elderly docent at Bedtime Castle who had studied medieval life for decades mentioned that this is a common question. In truth, not everyone perished in winter. The cold often claimed the very young and the very old first. Okay, I get it. You're wondering why they didn't just make warmer castles if it was so bad. That's a great question. The answer lies in the fact that they were engaged in different struggles. Their main focus was survival in a harsh world, where nearby lords could easily take over their land. Stone walls protected them from arrows and fire, while the cold was just another challenge to face. Picture your home built mainly to keep you safe from harm, with comfort being just a secondary concern. That's what living in a castle is like. The lord's wife stands in the doorway, bundled up in layers even though it's early. She sighs, mentioning the freezing eastern storage room and the apple barrels. You nod, knowing this is a familiar winter struggle. The food stores freeze, leading to spoilage when they thaw, adding to the ongoing worries of the season. Send 3 men to move the barrels closer to the kitchen, you say, your voice rough from sleep and the chill. The kitchen is often one of the few truly warm spots in the castle, with cooking fires burning nearly all day, creating a cozy refuge. This warmth plays a role in the sleeping arrangements, which may surprise you later. The morning light filters through the window coverings, made of oiled parchment that allows some light in while blocking the harsh wind. It casts a soft yellowish glow across the room, making your breath visible in the chilly air. Now this is where it becomes truly captivating, as thriving in these conditions wasn't just about withstanding the cold. It involved a whole set of knowledge, methods, and everyday habits that people today have largely overlooked. People in medieval times were far from foolish, a professor of medieval studies once shared with me. They were incredibly resourceful, as survival depended on it. He was correct. The men and women residing in those cold stone fortresses devised impressive methods for staying alive, and these methods varied greatly based on one's position within the castle's hierarchy. As the lord, you had certain benefits, yet even with those, winter nights felt like a struggle against a cold so fierce it could freeze your heart in your sleep. How did they manage it? How did people endure sleeping in what were essentially icy stone boxes? The solution includes warm stones, smart bed layouts, sharing body warmth, and dedicated helpers whose main task was to ensure you stayed warm while you slept. The first light of day shines on the frost that settled on the window overnight. A new day of battling the cold starts. And as you get out of bed, you understand that your true foe isn't the threats outside, but winter itself. Your steward arrives, weary yet committed. My lord, would you like me to warm the bed again tonight with the heated stones? We're almost out of the right fuel. You nod with a serious expression. Make it 2 stones. This winter feels particularly biting. He bows and steps back, already thinking about how to keep the house warm for another night, because that's what life in the castle was truly about. Survival, one cold night after another. As you encounter another chilly day, you find yourself thinking about how the others in the castle are managing. From the highest noble to the lowest servant, everyone is battling the same foe, a cold so fierce it feels almost like a living thing, seeking out any vulnerability to take away the warmth from people. The interesting thing is how each person faced and dealt with this cold in their own way, based on their rank in the castle, leading us to a key survival item in any medieval castle: the bed. A bed like no other, crafted for a single purpose, to ensure your safety through the night until dawn arrives. The bedroom door swings open, letting in a chill of fresh air. 2 servants walk in, holding what appears to be a large metal frying pan with a long wooden handle. Inside, there are bright coals from the fire in the kitchen below. This isn't just breakfast cooking. It's the line between making it through the night and succumbing to the cold. "Watch the embers, boy," the older servant tells his younger assistant. "A single spark on these sheets and the entire room ignites." He is correct. The warming pan, gently gliding between the bed sheets, is like a fire hazard on a stick. Yet, in a medieval castle, this risky tool was seen as a must-have innovation. Welcome to the medieval bedroom, a clever and essential part of life in the castle. Everything about it, from its design to its materials, was created with one goal in mind: to keep people warm enough to wake up alive the next morning. The four-poster bed wasn't designed for its elegance. It served as a practical solution for medieval living. "Look at those curtains," the castle steward says, gesturing to the heavy fabric draped from the bed frame. "Those are not meant for privacy. They are essential for survival." He's being honest. The four-poster bed with thick curtains felt like a cozy tent in a cold room. When you closed those curtains, you made a small, cozy space where your body heat could warm the air around you instead of vanishing into the cold room. Imagine, without those curtains, the warmth your body creates would just float up and away from you. The cozy bed held the warmth right where you wanted it. The bed is elevated, standing about 3 feet above the floor. This was not just for appearance. It was a smart move to stay away from the coldest air in the room that gathered near the floor. Chilly air goes down. Here, it could be 5 degrees warmer than if you were sleeping at a lower elevation. 5 degrees may seem small, but when you're close to freezing, it can be the crucial factor between life and death. Now, let's discuss what you're really resting on. The mattress is a wonder of old-world craftsmanship. A layer of ropes is pulled tight across the wooden frame, forming the original box spring. These ropes require frequent tightening, leading to the saying, "sleep tight." "Crank it twice a week or you'll end up on the floor," the lady's maid says, showing how to tighten the ropes. When they become too worn to use, it's time for replacements. Write it down in the home budget. Above these ropes lies the mattress, and if you're fortunate to be of noble birth, yours is filled with soft feathers. Down mattresses offered a top-notch choice, keeping the chill from seeping up while shaping to your body to avoid any cold spots. "The feather bed costs more than what a laborer earns in a year," the steward proudly explains, "collected from geese in 3 different counties. Below you might find a linen sheet. But unlike today's bedding, there wouldn't be a sheet covering you. You would have plenty of wool blankets, maybe even some furs if you had enough money." The lady's maid explains that these are sheepskins with the wool still attached. Place them with the wool side facing down against your body for maximum warmth. Now, let's talk about the simple routine you have before bedtime in your room. The servants are moving carefully, making your bed with great attention to detail. First, they take the warming pan and slide it between the layers of bedding to get rid of the dampness and chill. They'll keep this up for almost 30 minutes, constantly moving the pan to avoid burning the linens. "Look for dampness here," the head servant says, pointing to the center of the mattress. "If it feels damp, continue to warm it up. A damp bed in winter can be really harmful." He's correct. Moisture was the hidden danger in medieval castles. The stone walls dripped with moisture as the temperature shifted, making everything feel constantly damp, even the bedding. A wet bed in cold weather could be very dangerous. As the warming pan does its job, other tasks are underway. Warm stones wrapped in fabric are set down at the end of the bed. These aren't the smooth river rocks you might picture. They're carefully chosen stones from kitchen fires, often made of soapstone or granite that holds heat really well. A servant says these will stay warm until morning, gently placing one at the foot of the bed. "Watch your feet. They've scorched quite a few toes." Hold on, there's additional information. A small brazier of coals could be placed nearby, but not too close to the bed, offering a gentle warmth to the room. In the grandest castles, this brazier could burn unique woods or fragrant incense to cover the constant scent of smoke and dampness. The steward mentions that apple wood burns cleanly, while oak has a longer burn time. Your dad liked oak best. Don't forget the foot warmer, a little wooden box with holes in the lid and handles, where hot coals would be put inside. This would sit at the bottom of the bed, making a cozy place for chilly feet. One servant whispers to another that the Countess of Warwick lost 2 toes to the cold last winter. They turned black, and the doctor simply cut them off. It wasn't unusual. Frostbite could happen, even inside. Fingers, toes, ears, and noses were especially at risk. Warming the bed was not only about feeling cozy, it was also about avoiding real physical harm. Next up is an important step in getting ready for bed: warm beverages. A servant comes in holding a hot cup of tea. "Warm wine, my lord, with a hint of cinnamon and cloves." This was more than just a nice drink before bed. Alcohol opens up blood vessels, making you feel warm, but it actually cools you down more quickly over time, a fact that people in medieval times didn't grasp. People in medieval times thought the spices could warm you up. The warmth of something hot before bed can provide a comforting feeling, regardless of its scientific backing. Now that the bed is set, it's your turn to prepare, and this is where bedtime routines from medieval times differ greatly from those today. Initially, you wouldn't put on pajamas or a nightgown, as those became popular much later. Most medieval nobles typically slept without clothes or wore a basic linen shift. Hold on, exposed in cold weather? I spoke with a historian who focuses on everyday life in the medieval period. "It's surprising, isn't it?" she answered, and it becomes clear when you think about the whole system. Sharing a bed felt warmer with skin-to-skin contact, while clothes could hold moisture against the body, which posed a risk. Beds were often shared, rarely just for one person. The lord and lady of the castle would probably share a bed, not only because they are married, but also to keep warm. On very cold nights, a loyal servant might sleep at the foot of the noble's bed, providing extra warmth. In the winter of 1408, the Duchess of Norfolk shared her bed with 3 ladies, with one at her feet and one on each side, as the historian describes. It was seen as a privilege, not a burden. In medieval winters, body heat was a precious resource, too important to squander on individual sleeping spaces. Now, with the bed warmed, the hot stones in place, and the curtains ready to be drawn, there's one more important part of a cozy night: the nightcap. And I don't mean the drink. Your manservant suggests, "Always cover your head, my lord," as he hands you a knitted wool cap. A lot of your warmth escapes from your head. Although modern science has debated the exact percentage of heat lost through your head, the idea remains valid. A bare head in a chilly place causes a lot of heat to escape. People in medieval times naturally knew this and often went to bed with something on their heads during winter. As you lie down in bed, the staff gently pull the thick curtains around you, wrapping you in a cozy fabric embrace. The change happens quickly and is striking. In this small space, it feels warmer as your body heat starts to warm the little bit of air around you, instead of disappearing into the cold, large room. The warm stones glow softly by your feet. The bed, lifted off the chilly floor, is warm and ready to use. The layers of wool and fur blankets hold in heat well, and as your body warms this cozy space, the temperature becomes, if not comfortable by today's standards, at least bearable. "Is there anything more you need, my lord?" inquires the servant from behind the curtain. "No. Make sure the fire is set for the morning. It's important to keep the main fire in the chamber burning through the night." Banking the fire by covering it with ashes helped slow its burn while keeping the embers warm. This way, it could be easily revived in the morning, avoiding the hard work of starting a new fire in the cold. As the servants exit, carrying away the candles, which pose a fire risk and cost a lot, you find yourself in almost complete darkness, wrapped up in your fabric survival pod. The wind howls outside, the fire crackles softly, and you might hear mice scurrying in the walls. Back then, sleep felt different. A sleep historian once shared with me. People frequently found themselves awake in the middle of the night for a short while before drifting back to sleep. They referred to it as the first sleep and the second sleep, with the time in between seen as just part of the routine. This 2-part sleep pattern could have helped people survive in cold castles, letting them check fires, add warming stones, or move around to stay warm before going back to bed for the second sleep cycle. While you may feel safe inside your curtained bed, what about the others in the castle? The survival strategies changed a lot based on one station, and so did the odds of making it through the night. The lady's maid sleeps on a trundle bed, a simple low frame on wheels that can slide under the main bed during the day. She enjoys the warmth from the room's fire, but she doesn't have her own bed curtains. Instead, she puts on every piece of clothing she has, and maybe sleeps with a warm stone at her feet if she's lucky. An elderly woman, who had been a castle servant in her youth, shared with a Victorian historian how we argued over the sleeping spots. Being near the kitchen wall was ideal, as the ovens kept it warm throughout the night. Yet despite these efforts, the cold still pressed in. Dark tales often describe the pain of winter nights spent in cold stone castles. In the story of Jocelyn of Brakeland, a monk from the 12th century, he tells of a castle where the cold was so intense that the wine froze in the cups, and the water in the washing bowls turned to ice, even close to the fire. Picture sipping from a cup and discovering the wine frozen to the edge. That was the situation. As morning breaks, the castle feels its coldest. The fires have gone out overnight, and the stone walls have been chilling for hours. This is the riskiest moment, when the body's core temperature dips to its lowest point. The first servant to step into your room carries news with the morning warmth. Old Walter didn't wake up this morning, my lord. He was found stiff in the guard room. In medieval winters, deaths from cold, known as hypothermia, happened often enough that they rarely got noted. The old, the very young, and the sick were especially at risk. But even healthy adults could fall victim if their ways of staying warm at night didn't work. The four-poster bed, with its clever design, was truly a life-saving invention, not just a luxury. The warming pan filled with hot coals was crucial for health, while the layers of wool and fur served as vital protection against the cold. As you step out from your cozy sleeping area into the chilly room, you remember that the main focus of medieval bedroom design was survival, not comfort. "Put on your coziest clothes, my lord," suggests your servant. The messenger reports that snow is coming down thickly. Though you found comfort in your well-made bed last night, many in the castle faced hardships, and today will present its own trials as the struggle against the cold goes on. However, the most intriguing part of this conflict isn't located in the Lord's chamber with its comforts. To grasp the cleverness and strength of those living in medieval castles, we should consider how most of the household, the servants, coped with the harsh cold each night. Their strategies varied, yet they were just as clever, and in some ways, even more effective than those used by their noble masters. Servants didn't have fancy four-poster beds or personal warming pans, so they came up with their own ways to stay warm, often using the idea that human warmth was the best heat source of all. Servants slept closely together like puppies in a cozy pile, as noted in a medieval household account. Gathered close for warmth, about 10 or 12 in a room. The way everyone came together to combat the cold showed that survival was about teamwork, not just one person. This was especially clear in how the servants slept, which we'll look at next. As your servant assists you in getting ready for the day, putting on warm woolen clothes to keep the heat in, you can hear the castle waking up around you. The kitchen is filled with warmth as the bread ovens are stoked, a cozy spot where the kitchen servants would gather throughout the night. The great hall below is getting ready for the day's events, with fresh rushes spread on the floor to keep the chill of the stone at bay. Meanwhile, a gravedigger is working to break through the frozen ground, making space for old Walter, yet another casualty of the harsh medieval winter. In this setting, your bed was more than just a piece of furniture. It was your safe haven in a world where the cold felt like a threat. For the castle's servants, lacking such comforts, staying alive meant finding even more inventive ways to cope. The kitchen at night felt like a whole new place. As the lord and lady settled into their cozy four-poster beds, surrounded by soft curtains and warm stones, the castle's servants braved the biting cold outside. Their tools, closeness, creativity, and one another. "The best spots are right behind the bread ovens," Meg whispers to the new boy who just arrived last week. She's been a kitchen maid for 12 years. Stone keeps its warmth until morning, making the extra mice worthwhile. She has a point. The large bread oven set into the kitchen walls soaked up heat during the day of baking and released it gently all night long. The stone wall behind these ovens was a great place to sleep, sought after through unspoken servant rankings and gentle friendships. She warns you that Martin will break your fingers if you take his spot, pointing to a big man stirring a pot of stew. "I've been sleeping there for a long time, even before you came along." The life of servants in medieval castles was different from what many people picture. There weren't any private servant rooms with tidy little beds lined up neatly. For many of the lower-ranking staff, sleeping arrangements were temporary, shared, and driven by one main worry: stay warm and cozy. As a graduate student, I explored many castle ruins, and an archaeologist mentioned that I should keep an eye out for the servants' bedrooms. Then I noticed I was thinking like someone from today. They didn't have bedrooms. They had places to sleep, often just for a little while. The great hall, bustling with life during the day, turned into a large sleeping area at night. Servants would lay out straw pallets or basic wool mats on the floor, usually close to the central hearth that kept embers glowing throughout the night. But don't envision tidy lines of resting helpers. The situation was much more disordered and, honestly, personal. The archaeologist explained that court records from 1340 noted a complaint about 43 servants sleeping in a hall designed for 30. They were stacked closely, together. This was more than just too many people. It was about staying alive. Human bodies produce warmth, and in the harsh chill of a medieval castle, that warmth was too precious to squander on personal space or privacy. They slept soundly, just like a bunch of little puppies, a tour guide at Bodiam Castle once shared with me. All mixed up in piles, the cold would get you if you thought too highly of your personal space. In medieval times, servants saw body heat as something to share, unlike today's views on personal space. Sleeping close together wasn't just usual, it was essential. An elderly woman interviewed in the 1920s remembered sleeping in a cluster of 10 or 12, just like her grandmother, who had been a servant in a castle. From head to toe, toe to head, all mixed up, the little ones in the center, where it felt the coziest. This way of sleeping together for warmth even had its own name. The Latin phrase dormire acervitim, which means to sleep in a heap, shows up in medieval household records, recognizing this practice as common. But not all servants were the same in this nighttime struggle for survival. Even in sleep, there were levels of order. A thin man carrying firewood grumbles about sleeping by the door after 6 years here, looking for a partner who sleeps close to the kitchen wall. Yes, the sleeping positions of servants were so important that they were taken into account when considering marriage. A cozy place to sleep can change everything, bringing comfort instead of discomfort, health instead of sickness, and sometimes even life instead of death. The best places were along the kitchen walls, especially behind the bread ovens, close to the great hall hearth, in the laundry rooms where big cauldrons of water had been warmed all day, in the brewery where the fermentation created warmth, and above the stables where the warmth from the animals rose through the wooden floors. The head cook stands by the spice cabinet, Meg says, indicating a pallet that is noticeably larger than the rest. Spent 30 years there, with a feather pillow and all. Status in the servant world went beyond daily tasks and pay. It was about the place you were allowed to rest your head at night. An older woman kneads dough, and says some never got used to it. Lady Eliza's maid had come from a farm and spent every night for a month in tears about sharing her sleeping space with 20 others. By midwinter, she was vying for a central position just like everyone else. Hold on, I can hear you wondering, didn't they have beds? Some did, but not what we would think of as real beds. Higher-ranking servants, such as the steward, might have a basic wooden platform to elevate them above the floor. The luckiest personal servants, such as the lord's manservant or the lady's maid, had trundle beds, low frames on wheels that could be tucked away under the noble's bed during the day. However, for most, the floor served as their mattress, with only whatever padding they could find. When I began at the castle, all I had was my cloak to sleep on, says the older woman, dusting flour off her forearms. I collected bits of wool for a year to fill my own pallet, still using it after 20 years. The materials used for sleeping showed a clear difference in living conditions. While the lord rested on soft feather mattresses and smooth linen sheets, the servants had to settle for straw pallets, often filled with whatever materials they could gather, like wool scraps, horsehair, dried moss, or herbs. A young girl proudly says, "All lavender and mine keeps the fleas away, mostly." When it comes to fleas, lice, bedbugs, and mice, they were unwanted companions that seemed to always show up. Sharing a sleeping space was important for staying warm, but it came with some drawbacks related to cleanliness and the spread of illness. A historian shared that court records from Winchester Castle mention an outbreak of winter fever that took the lives of 8 servants, who all slept in the same corner of the hall. When illness reached these sleeping groups, it spread quickly. However, the option of sleeping alone in the cold was often viewed as a bigger danger, as hypothermia could take lives faster than most infections. As we watch Meg go through her evening routine, we notice a clever survival tactic used by servants, managing her clothing wisely. She tells the new boy to always keep his clothes on, to wear all that he has, to remove just the outer layer for work, and to put it back on when it's time for sleep. While nobles often slept without clothes under their blankets, servants usually kept their clothes on, using them like extra layers instead of taking them off. Some even slept in their shoes, both to keep warm and because good shoes were precious and might be taken. The elderly woman from the 1920s interview remembered that they would sleep with their shoes tied to their belts using twine, as her grandmother had said. Lose your shoes in winter, and it feels like you're in big trouble. Getting ready for bed followed a familiar pattern and set of steps. As the kitchen work came to an end for the night, the servants would start to find their places, spreading out the bedding they had. Martyr, your palate is leaking again. Call the cook to a laundry maid, hang it by the fire, or we'll all be sleeping in a puddle. The bedding was often damp, causing worry. Servants who dealt with water, like laundry maids, scullery boys, and brewers, often had clothes and bedding that were always damp, which was a risky situation in the cold castle. In the evenings, the workers would gather around the kitchen fire, taking turns drying their pallets. It was just another simple act of togetherness in their fight against the cold. A former castle servant reminisced in a Victorian memoir about how they would hang everything possible close to the fires at night. The kitchen resembled a bustling market, with various clothes and bedding draped from every hook and beam. This straightforward method applied to additional survival strategies. Nobles used warming pans and hot stones that their servants prepared, while the servants came up with their own ways to keep warm. Do you see this? Meg holds out a smooth, rounded stone, roughly the size of a small loaf of bread, to the new boy. Place it in the ashes when baking is finished. Wrap it in cloth before sleeping. Keep it by your feet, and you'll appreciate it later. These makeshift bed warmers were essential for those who didn't have the comfort of specially designed warming pans. Heated stones, bricks, or sand-filled cloth bags were brought to bed, often shared among several people sleeping together. My sister and I had one brick to share, says a scullery maid cleaning a pot, taking turns placing it at our feet. As it cooled down, we would hold it close to our chest to keep the last bit of warmth. Some servants created unique tools tailored to their specific sleeping needs. Stable hands, who frequently rested above the horses to enjoy the warmth from the animals, made night buckets. These were clay containers filled with hot coals and topped with pierced lids, allowing them to safely provide heat in the hay-filled stables. Set the stable on fire, and you'll regret not having stayed cold, says the stable master. Lord William executed 2 boys for igniting a fire with their night bucket in 42. This was a serious warning. Castle fires were scary to think about, especially when it was dark, and there was always a struggle between wanting warmth and being afraid of flames. Servants who were blamed for the fires received harsh penalties, but enduring the cold without heat during the harsh winter months was often impossible. The coldest night I can recall, the old cook says as she settles onto her cozy spot in the kitchen corner, was the Feast of St. Lucy about 30 years ago. By morning, we found 3 kitchen boys dead, their skin as blue as woad. After that, the Lord gave us more charcoal in December, regardless of the price. Many castle servants had seen death from cold happen before. It influenced how they acted, the way they organized their communities, and their evening habits in ways that are hard for modern people to fully grasp. A medical historian explained to me that we often picture hyperthermia as an issue for mountaineers or those caught in blizzards. For those living in medieval castles, it was a danger inside, similar to our concerns about electrical fires or carbon monoxide. How could they tell when someone was giving in to the cold? They used their own words and signals to alert others. Keep an eye out if someone goes silent, Meg advises the new boy. If they stop shaking and mention feeling warm all of a sudden, wake the cook. That's the beginning of frost sleep. What she's describing in today's language is the strange behavior and mental disorientation that happened before dying from overheating. People in medieval times noticed these signs even though they didn't grasp the science behind them. They noticed that some individuals needed more attention, like the young children, the elderly, those who were thin, and the sick. On the coldest nights, these people were monitored more closely. Old Tom lies down between the baker's boy and the strong man, as Meg points to an older gentleman who is getting comfortable on a pallet. It's been like that since he hit 60. Coziest places for our seniors. This casual way of looking out for those in need shows how the community recognized the importance of sticking together for everyone's well-being, not just personal ease. What occurred when someone started to exhibit signs of a severe cold? Servants had their own plans for emergencies. Remove their clothing and place them skin to skin between the two strongest, the cook says plainly when I inquire. Cover everyone with any blankets you can find. Usually works well, especially if you notice it early. This quick sharing of body heat, often with 3 or 4 people huddled together, was a crucial technique used without shame or delay. Staying alive was the top priority. But there were times when even the best efforts fell short, particularly during the harshest cold or when supplies dwindled. The winter of '86 was harsh, the old cook remembers, her voice softening. 23 servants at 17 by Easter. The cold claimed them one by one, and there was nothing to do. Winter death counts were noted in household records next to food and candle expenses. The human toll of medieval life recorded with the same careful detail as the cost of salt or wine. As night settles over the castle, the kitchen becomes still at last. The servants arrange themselves on their pallets in familiar patterns, with the oldest and youngest in the middle and the strongest on the outside. The bedding is neatly arranged, shared, and tucked in place. Bodies close together, comfortably sharing warmth, relying on each other for heat. Good night, and may God keep you warm, whispers the cook. A familiar blessing during the cold winter months. In the dark, a gentle hum starts, an old melody about blooming flowers and bright sunshine. More people gather, the soft tune standing out against the fierce wind outside the kitchen walls. This is also a part of survival, finding warmth and community amidst the chilly solitude. Every winter night, a voice in the darkness whispers that my father sang. He mentioned it made him think that the cold wouldn't last always. This is maybe the most ignored part of how people living in medieval castles got through the winter nights. It wasn't just about sharing warmth and arranging their sleeping spaces. It was also about the mental adjustments that helped them cope with the cold. They shared tales, a storyteller explained to me. Stories of winter shared through generations, melodies and prayers, meant for the chilly season. These were more than just entertainment. They served as ways to handle and make sense of an experience that could overwhelm many people today. As the kitchen grows quiet, the soft sounds of breathing and the occasional snore show that everyone has found some rest, even with the cold, making each breath visible in the soft glow of the fire. However, not everyone in the castle can enjoy the comfort of sleep. Even in these shared spaces, outside the kitchen, in the chilly hallways and on the open walls, another group fights against the cold with limited supplies and no chance to gather for warmth. The night watchmen stand alone in the cold, dark corners of the castle, their experience a clear example of how people endured the harsh winters of medieval times. Feel sorry for those on the wall tonight, whispers a voice from the shadows of the kitchen. Some would rather snuggle up with pigs than keep watch in this weather. And indeed, some servants did just that. Finding a spot in the animal quarters was a clever way to survive, especially for those tending to the animals. The warmth from horses, cows, pigs, and even chickens was too precious to ignore. The stable lads enjoyed the winter, but summer was tough, the cook notes. They had warm nights filled with the smell of horses or cool nights with the scent of kitchen smoke. Each servant picks their preference. As we leave the servants in their shared sleeping spaces, we can see how their experience contrasts with that of the nobles in their curtained beds. Both groups faced the same struggle against the cold, but in different ways. The nobles relied on technology and the help of servants, using warming pans, bed curtains, and hot bricks. The servants, on the other hand, fought this battle through community and adaptation, using shared body heat, clever sleeping arrangements, and makeshift warming tools. Both were vying for the same goal: to see the dawn. Yet within the castle, there was a group whose struggle against the biting cold was more urgent, facing perhaps the harshest reality of all. While the nobles rested in their warm beds and the servants gathered on their mats, the night watchmen stood alone on the castle walls, fully exposed to the winter's chill with little protection. Their tale is one of resilience, pushing the boundaries of what one can endure. As the kitchen drifts into restless slumber, these lone figures embark on their long night of battling the frigid air. The cook whispers a prayer for those on the wall as she drifts off to sleep, making the sign of the cross. Many watchmen have been found frozen at their posts by morning. Her words linger in the cold air, a reminder that the hardships of the servants were still easier than what the night guards faced. The wind on the castle walls feels alive. It doesn't just blow. It seeks out every gap in your clothing and every bit of exposed skin, stealing warmth faster than you can keep it. For the night watchmen of medieval castles, this wind was both a companion and an enemy during the long, cold hours of their duty. "Third watch is the worst," mutters Edwin, a seasoned veteran of 15 years on the walls. It's the coldest time of night, just before dawn, when men die on third watch. He's not exaggerating. While the nobles sleep in their curtained beds and servants huddle together in the kitchen, the night watchmen face the winter darkness alone, in the most exposed parts of the castle, with almost no protection from the biting cold. Last winter, they found Aldred frozen, still standing upright, eyes open, didn't even fall when he died. The young guard, Watt, swallows hard. It's his first winter on the walls, and at 19, he's heard enough stories to know that the cold can be deadlier than enemy arrows. The job of a castle night watchman is straightforward. Stay awake, stay alert, watch for danger, and signal if anything suspicious appears. But doing this in winter conditions that could freeze a man to death is far from easy. My grandfather was a night watchman at Warwick Castle, a medieval reenactor told me. Family legend says he lost 3 toes and the tip of one ear to frostbite, earning him the nickname Notch for the rest of his life, unlike modern security guards with heated guardhouses and warm clothing. Medieval watchmen stood on the castle walls, exposed to the cold with only stone for shelter. The stone felt icy, stealing warmth, Edwin explains, stamping his feet on the walkway. If you stand still too long, you might never move again. He shows the watchman's walk, shifting weight from foot to foot, swinging arms against the body. This wasn't just restlessness. It was about survival, keeping blood flowing to avoid frostbite. Never stop moving, he instructs. What if you're tired? Even if your legs ache, movement keeps you alive. The night watch worked in shifts, with castles dividing the night into 3 or 4 watches, each assigned to different men. A watch could last 2 to 4 hours, brief enough to be manageable in theory, but long enough to be dangerous in practice. 4 hours in summer, 2 in winter, Edwin says. It used to be 4 hours all year until 3 men died in 1 month. The shift system brought its own dangers. The change between watches left the castle vulnerable, and waking sleeping guards in the freezing cold was a challenge. Some never wake, Edwin says with a serious tone. If you fall asleep on watch in this weather, you might not get up again. Cold sleep can turn into death sleep. The clothing of a night watchman was meant to protect against the cold, but it was far from enough by today's standards. Let's see what Edwin and Watt are wearing on this chilly night. First, there are linen undergarments that cover the body from neck to ankle. On top of that, 1 or 2 woolen tunics, with the outer one possibly lined with fur if the guard is lucky. Then woolen leggings and thick hose, along with leather boots stuffed with straw for warmth. A woolen cloak, maybe lined with sheepskin, keeps them cozy, and a woolen cap is pulled down over the ears. Leather gloves, if they can find them, but many make do with cloth mittens or nothing at all. Edwin shows his bare, reddened hands and says gloves are for rich men. He can't feel the bell rope or the sword hilt with them. Medieval guards face a tough challenge. They need to stay warm but also be ready for combat and able to signal. It's a tricky balance, and their hands and feet often pay the price. Edwin shows how to check your fingers every 15 minutes, lifting his hands to the dim light of a small torch. If you can't feel them but they're still red, that's a good sign. White patches indicate trouble, and black means you might lose them. This essential understanding of frostbite signs was shared by experienced guards with newcomers, crucial survival tips in a time without medical guides. Yet just wearing the right clothes wasn't sufficient. Guards came up with extra methods to endure the harsh cold during their night shifts. Look at this. Edwin takes out a small leather flask from his tunic, filled with pepper ale. It burns a bit going down, but warms the belly and keeps the mind sharp, unlike wine. Night watchmen often had warming drinks, while nobles enjoyed their spiced wine. Guards preferred drinks that heated them up without making them drunk. Hot ale with pepper, ginger, or mustard seeds was popular, and some guards even liked a mix of hot water, vinegar, and honey. The steward hands out a flask to each man at the beginning of the watch, Edwin explains. If it's empty when you report for duty, you'll face punishment, which helps prevent everyone from drinking it all at once. These warming drinks weren't just for comfort. They were essential for survival. The brief warmth they offered could mean the difference between staying alert and falling into a cold-induced sleep that could lead to death. Another survival tool was the watchfire. Though these sparked debate, small braziers or fire pots were sometimes placed at key spots along the battlements, but they had notable downsides. "Fire makes you a target," Edwin says, pointing to a small brazier flickering in a sheltered corner of the wall walk, revealing your position to the enemy and ruining your night vision. Worse still, the difference between the fire's warmth and the icy air can be risky. Warm your hands, then touch cold stone or metal, and your skin might stick and tear, Edwin cautions. It's safer to remain consistently cold than to alternate between extremes. Even with the dangers, watchfires were often the sole source of warmth for guards on the coldest nights. Records from medieval England show that money was regularly spent on coal for watchmen during winter, indicating that the risk was considered acceptable. Lord William permits 3 braziers on the east wall from Martinmas to Candlemas, according to Edwin. No more. He says we'd set the castle ablaze if he provided us with more. Outside of the official supplies, the night watchmen came up with their own clever ways to stay warm. Small heated stones tucked into pockets, bags of oats warmed before a watch and placed inside clothing, even bags of hot sand that mold to the body and release heat gradually. Some men urinate in their boots, Edwin shares with a grimace. Warm for a moment, then misery follows. I wouldn't suggest it. This drastic action highlights the severe circumstances these men faced. Unlike the servants who could huddle for warmth or the nobles with their heated beds, night watchmen confronted the cold in stark solitude, even when several guards were on duty together. Edwin explains that they can't huddle together on watch. They need to face different directions to cover all approaches. When men bunch up, the cold winds hit harder. Their duty requires this separation, which means they miss out on the warmth of communal body heat that others in the castle enjoy. This isolation makes their fight against the cold even tougher. Edwin says, "My feet haven't been warm from November to March in 15 years. It's just how it is. You either adapt or you don't make it." His nonchalant mention of death shows a lot about how the watchman views life and its end. Records from different medieval castles show that dying during night watch was a common risk, especially for older or weaker guards. At Norwich Castle in 1412, 4 night watchmen were discovered dead at their posts after a very cold night, according to a medieval historian. The castle steward just noted the cost of replacing them, much like recording the expense of damaged equipment. The cost of keeping the castle safe was often overlooked by those who felt secure within its walls. However, the night watchmen formed a close-knit community, always looking out for one another. "Check on the old ones," Edwin advises Watt. "Thomas in the North Tower is 60 if he's a day. Make sure to look for him every half hour. If he's sitting, wake him up. Sitting in this cold is like giving up." The most vulnerable were meant to be spared from winter night duty. But things don't always go as planned. Old soldiers, who had served the Lord for many years, often ended up on the walls, no matter how fit they were for the job. "No one wants night watch," Edwin says, "but the Lord needs eyes on the walls, and we all serve or suffer." Still, not all watchmen were the same. Their equipment and conditions changed a lot based on the castle's wealth and the Lord's focus on security. In the richest castles, night watchmen might have little guard rooms built into the wall, small stone rooms with narrow windows for watching, and tiny hearths for warmth. These watchmen could switch between keeping watch and warming up, a comfort that greatly lowered cold-related deaths. Edwin says he heard Windsor has guard rooms with real braziers inside, sounding a bit jealous. "Kingsmen don't have to brave the wind like we do. Other castles give their guards special winter gear." Accounts from the Tower of London describe watch cloaks made of several layers of wool, with a wax-treated outer layer for water resistance. Some lords offered fur-lined boots or simple mittens that could be easily slipped on over the guard's sword hand and taken off quickly if necessary. However, Edwin and Watt lack these comforts. Their lord has a modest amount of wealth, and the castle's supplies for the watchmen are quite simple. "Here," Edwin says, giving Watt a flat stone roughly the size of a small loaf of bread. "Keep it tucked inside your tunic, against your belly. It won't keep you warm for long, but it's better than nothing." The stone, warmed by the brazier, gives off a gentle heat. Holding this small comfort close to your body could be crucial during the long hours to come. As night falls, the air grows colder. Watt can see his breath in the chilly air, and the sword hilt feels sharp against his skin. The stone pressed against him has turned icy. Edwin whispers, glancing east where the sky remains dark, untouched by dawn. The world feels heavy. The sun seems distant, dead time. Medical science has confirmed what these guards already understood. The body's core temperature naturally falls to its lowest point in the hours before dawn, making this the most perilous time for those facing extreme cold. Men die in the third watch, Edwin says again. Stay awake. Keep moving. To fight off the sleepiness brought on by the cold, watchmen came up with different methods. Some kept small bags of strong-smelling herbs like rosemary, mint, or crushed garlic to sniff when they felt drowsy. Others would pinch themselves or lightly prick their hands with a knife to stay awake. When your thoughts begin to drift, Edwin suggests biting your tongue. The pain helps to keep you grounded. Maybe the best approach is simply to talk. Guards would chat endlessly during the toughest times, asking each other questions that needed answers, sharing stories that called for reactions. Tell me about your village, Edwin tells Watt. Every detail. The baker's name. The color of the tavern door. This was more than just passing time. They were keeping an eye on how each other was feeling. Slurred speech or confusion might be early signs of serious cold exposure, known today as hypothermia. But back then, the guards referred to it as frost-taken. If I start to lose my words, Edwin says, give me a good slap and call for the next watch ahead of time. It was better to deal with the steward's anger than to feel the biting cold. The watchmen relied on each other for survival, creating a strong sense of friendship. No matter their ages or backgrounds, they came together, united by the common fight against the chill. My cousin worked as a night watchman at Kenilworth, as the medieval reenactor shared with me. He mentioned a saying, "Summer friends are many, winter watchmen are few, but true." Those who endured several winters on the walls took pride in their resilience, wearing their struggles like a badge of honor. City guards have it easy. Edwin snorts with disdain. Always close to a tavern fire, the castle watchmen are the true warriors. Their sense of pride helps them endure the harsh conditions, giving purpose to their struggles, but it doesn't make the cold any less lethal. As the hours pass slowly, Watt starts to feel what all night watchmen fear, the tempting lure of sleep brought on by the cold. His eyelids become heavy, and his thoughts slow down. The cold doesn't seem so harsh anymore. In fact, he feels a sense of warmth creeping in. Watt, Edwin's clear voice and a quick slap pull him back. His eyes were closing, so he needed to talk, count the stars if necessary. What Watt felt was the risky high that often comes before freezing to death, the body's last give-in to the cold. Edwin noticed the signs because he had encountered them before in men who never woke up again. The real danger isn't feeling cold, he explains with urgency. It's when you stop feeling cold, when the shivers fade away and warmth appears from nowhere. That's when death is near. This straightforward understanding of hypothermia symptoms, learned through harsh experience rather than formal training, was crucial survival knowledge shared from those who had been through it to those who were just starting out. The mental struggles of night watch were just as tough as the physical ones. Being alone in the dark and feeling uneasy turned the mind into a tricky place that affected many. The mind plays tricks in the cold dark, Edwin says, looking at a shadow in the distance. Imagine seeing things that don't exist and hearing whispers carried by the breeze. In medieval times, guards often experienced cold-induced hallucinations, known as frost visions or winter's whispers. The tricky part was telling apart harmful illusions from actual dangers. If you're uncertain, just ring the small bell, Edwin says, gesturing to a bell nearby. It will alert the sergeant without causing too much fuss. It's better to have a false alarm than to miss a warning. The castle's security system has adapted to the cold, adding extra measures and checks to help the guards perform better in harsh conditions. As night slowly gives way to dawn, Watt and Edwin finish their watch without any more events. Their replacements come in, stamping their feet and blowing into their hands, looking serious as they get ready to face the cold. Made it through another, Edwin says with a satisfied nod, as they head down the stone stairs toward the warmth of the castle inside. Another night passed without the Reaper's touch. This was how success was counted during the winter watch. Not by enemies seen or alarms sounded, but by making it through until the guard changed. Inside, they went straight to the kitchen, where the first servants were already lighting the day's fires. The watchmen have a special right that comes from their hardships. They get first dibs at the kitchen hearth. Step back. Make way, the head cook instructs, gently pushing others aside as Edwin and Watt move toward the warm fire. Nightmen receive the flames first. This tradition, which gives night watchmen priority access to morning warmth, was common in many castles. It recognized the harsh conditions these men faced and offered a reward for their service. However, the warming process was risky. Frostbitten fingers and toes could suffer more harm from quick heat, and the pain of blood flow returning to half-frozen limbs was intense. Keep your hands and feet at a safe distance, Edwin advises, showing how to turn slowly in front of the fire to warm up gradually. Quick heat can be harsh. I've watched men lose fingers that made it through the cold, only to be damaged by the fire. As they gradually warm up, Edwin checks Watt's hands and face for any signs of frostbite. Seeing nothing, he nods in agreement. "You'll do," he says plainly. "Rest now. We return at sunset." And that was the final harsh truth of the night watchmen's lives. The short break of daylight would slip away quickly, and darkness would bring another struggle against the cold, night after night, week after week, throughout the long winter months. This ongoing challenge shaped these men in ways that are difficult for us to picture today. Their bodies adjusted, becoming more tolerant to the cold, altering circulation to keep their core warm while sacrificing their extremities. Their minds adapted as well, learning to work through discomfort that would stop most people today. People often wonder if I'm scared of the dark, an old security guard who worked nights in winter once shared with me. I chuckle because darkness isn't the real threat. It's the cold that creeps in, quietly and relentlessly. Cold can be deadly. Edwin would have grasped this feeling completely. Just like the many unknown night watchmen who endured harsh winters, battling not only outside foes, but also the chilling darkness that surrounded them. Watt sinks onto his pallet in the guard's quarters, too tired to take off his boots. He realizes he has made it through his first deep winter night on the walls, but winter stretches on, and many nights lie ahead before spring arrives. "Rest while you can," says another guard, already snoring before he finishes. For now, both Edwin and Watt have made it through the harsh cold that took many before them, but the night will return, bringing with it the ongoing struggle against the cold that shapes the lives of the night watchmen. In the winter, life in a medieval castle was a tough challenge for everyone, shaped by their roles. The lord stayed warm in his bed, while the servants gathered close for warmth, and the watchmen braved the cold alone. Each person used what they had to fight the chill, but sometimes even the best plans fell short. When winter was harsher than expected, supplies ran low, or unexpected problems arose, even those living comfortably faced serious danger. These harsh winters pushed the creativity of castle residents to the edge, leading them to take drastic steps just to make it to spring. The winter of 1395 stuck in people's minds, not just because it was freezing, but because it felt like it would never finish. March passed by without any warmth. Then came April, bringing more snow. By early May, when spring was expected to be in full bloom, ice still covered the castle moat each morning. We referred to it as the endless winter, as noted in the Warwick Castle steward's account. Supplies intended for 3 months lasted 5. God's mercy kept us from eating the dogs. Harsh winters like this forced those living in medieval castles to stretch their usual ways of surviving. When the cold lingered longer than anyone thought possible, when food supplies ran low, and when fuel became hard to find, true desperation emerged, showing just how fragile life in a medieval castle could be. The steward reports to the lord, his expression serious, that the coal store is nearly empty, with only a quarter sack left. The woodpile, he adds, will run out in 3 days at this rate. The lord, wrapped in furs by the fire in the great hall, nods in agreement. He's been waiting for this news for weeks. "Let's put the winter protocols in place," he says softly. May God forgive us, the winter protocols. Every organized castle had them, though they were seldom talked about and even less often put into action. They were the backup plans, the final options, the harsh decisions for survival when usual ways didn't work. The first step was consolidation, a castle historian told me, which involved giving up parts of the castle to keep warmth in fewer areas. This meant sealing off entire sections, towers, halls, and even whole wings to direct limited heating resources to a few key spots. For those living in the castle, already used to tight spaces, This led to even more crowding. By the end of February, 63 people were sleeping in the Great Hall. According to an account from Kenilworth Castle, during a winter crisis in the 14th century, the smell was terrible, but no one wanted to sleep alone because of the cold. This gathering wasn't just for warmth, although that played a role. It was also about using fuel wisely, heating one area well instead of many areas poorly. The Lord's family was shifted from the tower bedroom to rooms next to the kitchen. As the castle steward notes in the household account, dignity was set aside for survival. That was a bold move. In medieval times, nobles set themselves apart from common people. A lord sleeping near his servants was a big deal, only done in rare situations. My grandfather recounted a tale from the winter of 42, where an old villager told a Victorian storyteller that the lord and lady actually slept in the kitchen, on simple mats just like the servants. "The cold brings everyone together," he said. This effect of harsh winter was brief, but important. People in the castle, who usually lived in separate worlds, found themselves sharing space, resources, and tips for survival. Lady Eleanor picked up knitting from the kitchen maids that winter. As a lady in waiting's diary notes, she expressed a preference for warm fingers over clean ones, which was surprising for a noble woman to say. But warm fingers were important when frostbite was a risk. In harsh winters, the rules of propriety eased out of necessity. Women who usually avoided manual work discovered practical skills from the staff. Noblemen who typically assigned all physical tasks shared the load of carrying firewood. The young lord joined the stable boys in chopping wood, as noted in a surprised entry in a castle account. His hands were sore and bleeding, but he kept going until night came. Castles had strict rules about sharing important supplies like fuel and food. These rules show a lot about what was important in medieval times and how power was organized. Fuel was distributed based on rank, but everyone received a minimum amount, as explained by a historian who focuses on medieval household management. Even during the toughest times, castle managers realized that allowing servants to freeze was counterproductive. The rationing system usually worked like this. The lord's family got enough fuel for one fire in their shared living area. Important. Staff like the steward, key knights, and the marshal received fuel for a small brazier in their rooms. Common servants didn't get their own supply, but enjoyed the warmth from the kitchen fires and shared sleeping spaces. The night watchmen got a bit more fuel for the braziers on the walls, recognizing the tough conditions they dealt with. The steward in our castle says coal goes first to the watchfires, then to the kitchen, and finally to the Great Hall. No private rooms will get fuel until we say otherwise. Food rationing worked on similar ideas but had key differences. Nobles might tolerate less comfort, but they seldom agreed to less nutrition. Typically, food rationing kept the quality of nobles' meals intact while significantly cutting down the quantity for everyone else. The lord's table gets less meat, 1/3 less. Servants receive half the usual bread, while the steward figures it out on a piece of parchment. The castle guards keep their full rations. Men standing guard in the cold need their strength. This practical way of rationing understood that different roles in the castle required different amounts of food. Those doing physical work in the cold, especially the night watchmen, needed more calories just to carry out their tasks. The guard discovered dead this morning didn't succumb to the cold alone, the castle physician notes somberly. The man was nothing but skin and bones under his cloak. It's hard to withstand winter without proper nourishment. When the usual rations fell short, those in the castle resorted to more desperate tactics to stay warm and keep their food from spoiling. This is where the cleverness of the medieval era shines through. The steward commands, "Gather all the furniture that isn't being used, chairs, tables, decorative screens, anything crafted from wood." Using furniture for firewood was a significant move that showed a serious crisis. In medieval castles, furniture was precious and not easy to come by. Choosing to destroy it for fuel meant that survival worries had taken priority over financial concerns. First, the old trestle tables from the feast hall were taken away, remembers a servant, from a particularly harsh winter. Then the benches followed. By March, the Lord allowed the cutting up of the great oak wardrobe that had belonged to his grandmother's wedding chest. I watched Lady Anne cry as they brought the axe down. But that was only the start. As winter troubles grew, those in the castle discovered fuel in more surprising spots. A castle chaplain confesses that they burned the decorative timbers from the chapel ceiling, seeking forgiveness while feeding God's house to the flames. What choice did they have? The children were turning blue with cold. Old linens, worn tapestries, broken tools, unused door frames, and even floorboards from abandoned parts of the castle all ended up in the fires during those desperate times. The third stair of the North Tower was taken apart for fuel, as noted by a steward with careful detail, and it will be rebuilt in spring if we are fortunate enough to see it. When regular fuel ran out, the people in the castle looked for other options, showing just how tough things had gotten. An older servant tells the younger staff to mix 1 part rendered fat with 2 parts dried horse dung and 1 part straw, shape it into cakes, and dry them by the fire, so they can burn slowly and hot when there's no wood left. These makeshift fuel cakes came about out of need. While they aren't as good as wood or coal, they can still offer important warmth when other options are gone. Different cultures in tough situations, from the Himalayas to the Arctic, have used similar fuels. "It smells terrible," grumbles a night squire, scrunching his nose at the burning cakes, "but it's better than freezing." The smell was definitely a drawback, just another annoyance in a season filled with them. But as the old saying goes, cold noses smell nothing. When survival is on the line, worries about nice scents fade away. Bringing livestock inside the castle, walls was even more extreme than burning furniture or making dung cakes. "Bring the milk cows into the inner bailey," orders the castle steward as another snowstorm approaches. The pigs and chickens are moved into the old storage room off the kitchen. We need their warmth more than we need cleanliness right now. This isn't just about saving valuable animals. While avoiding freezing to death is important, it's also about using their body heat to help warm the people living here. "We slept with the chickens," a kitchen maid confesses, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. "A dozen of us servant girls huddled in the hen house, feathers and dirt all around. But it was warm enough to get through the night. In the toughest times, animals were brought right into our homes." Records from various medieval castles tell of cows and horses being brought into great halls during severe weather, a practice that seemed unusual at the time. Young calves were housed in the lord's antechamber, as remembered by a dairymaid from a particularly cold winter. Lady Margaret took care of them, believing they were too precious to lose, and their warm breath helped keep the nearby rooms cozy. A cow gives off heat similar to a 1 kilowatt heater, providing noticeable warmth in a cold stone room. People in medieval times grasped this idea, even if they didn't fully understand the science behind it. Many pre-industrial cultures also shared their living spaces with animals during harsh winters. Mongolian herders used to bring baby animals into their yurts when the weather was tough. Alpine farmers would often design their homes with the stable on the ground floor, letting the warmth from the animals rise and heat the living space above. My grandmother mentioned that during the harsh winter of 1407, they kept the bees inside, as shared by an elderly beekeeper. Hives in the corners of the Great Hall might sound strange, but she insisted it was true. She claimed they were sleepy from the cold and didn't cause any issues, while the warmth from the hives offered some comfort. Whether this story is true or stretched, it highlights how these winter hardships affected people's minds. They are remembered as moments when usual rules didn't apply, and survival became the top priority. In addition to using physical methods, to stay warm, people living in medieval castles also made changes to their daily routines during winter emergencies. A key change was shifting their schedules. The steward would announce the new winter hours as the situation became more serious. Everyone wakes up at dawn and goes to sleep at sunset, with the only exception being the night watch. This simple routine makes the most of the daylight when it's a bit warmer and reduces the need for extra lights and heating during the coldest times. It also allows people to enjoy more time in bed, sometimes up to 14 or 16 hours on the shortest winter days. An elderly woman who once worked as a lady's maid explains, "We didn't sleep all those hours. We couldn't possibly, but we stayed in bed, several of us on a mattress, sharing warmth. It was better than sitting up in the cold and wasting precious fuel. This extended time in bed wasn't just for warmth. It also helped us save calories. When people are resting, they burn fewer calories compared to those who are active, which was crucial when food supplies were low. The mental impact of harsh winters is significant. Stories from that time highlight the stress caused by the long periods of cold, darkness, overcrowding, and hunger. After 6 weeks of snow, a sense of sadness filled the home, as noted by a castle chaplain. Men argued about small things, women cried for no reason, and the children seemed uninterested. I suggested prayer, but honestly, my own belief faltered as the cold continued. To address this psychological strain, castle communities created organized activities for winter challenges. These were not mere distractions. They were intentional methods to keep spirits high and strengthen social bonds during tough times. The steward calls for story circles, where everyone takes a turn to share tales, memories, or songs, ensuring that no one is left out, from the lord to the scullery boy. These organized social gatherings had several important roles. They strengthened community ties during difficult times, shared wisdom across generations, and offered a much-needed break from daily struggles. My father often mentioned how those story circles kept his spirits up during the long winter. A man whose ancestor was a castle guard shared that after weeks of cold and hunger, the stories provided the only real comfort he needed. Some castles turned these activities into a special winter role, the keeper of tales or winter speaker. This person was in charge of keeping the stories flowing, and sometimes adding more detailed tales to lift spirits. Martha knows more stories than any 3 people put together, the steward notes, assigning an older cook's assistant to the position. She'll plan the evening stories for the time being. This acknowledgement of morale as vital for survival shows a deep understanding of human psychology that we often overlook in medieval people. They might not have had our scientific terms, but they realized that the mind could be just as powerful in life or death as the body. During winter crises, religious practices became even more pronounced. Life in medieval times was already filled with religious observance, but harsh winters led to unique rituals and prayers aimed at surviving the cold. The castle chaplain instructed everyone to participate in thrice daily prayers to Saint Benedict the Snow Turner, with no excuses allowed. Saint Benedict wasn't officially called the Snow Turner in church teachings, but local customs often gave saints unique roles based on what the community needed. In this instance, a local tradition named Benedict as someone who could help end long winter weather. Other winter-related religious practices included blessing fuel supplies, lighting special candles on certain feast days, and sometimes holding processions around castle walls with relics thought to influence the weather. An elderly woman recalls walking the walls with St. Oswald's tooth, sharing a winter ritual from her childhood in a northern castle. The chaplain led everyone, from lords to scullery maids, all singing the Thor prayers together. The next day may not have been warmer, but we felt uplifted for having participated. The psychological benefit of these rituals probably mattered more than any weather changes, but they were still important to the people who practiced them. They offered a sense of order, hope, and control during times when people felt helpless. As winter emergencies dragged on for days, weeks, or even months, those living in castles had to make tough choices about who would get limited resources, showing a lot about medieval values and power dynamics. The steward decides that the elderly and sick will get 2 blankets but only half the food, reasoning that those who move less need more warmth but can manage with less to eat than those who are active. Children and pregnant women will receive milk every day, even if others have to do without, as the focus is on the future of the community rather than everyone's current comfort. These choices were not made easily, and the castle records sometimes show intense discussions among the leaders about the best way to share the limited supplies. The marshal said that guards should get special treatment because the castle's safety relied on them. According to one account, the chaplain replied that the youngest children should come first since they were the most vulnerable. The Lord listened to both sides and decided that night watchmen and children under 5 would get full rations, while everyone else would have theirs reduced by a third. During medieval crises, survival ethics were practical yet compassionate, structured but aware of those in need and their important roles. One notable measure taken during harsh winters was warm sleeping, a system that allowed the most vulnerable castle residents to have the warmest places to sleep. The steward would order the 3-shift sleeping arrangement when the cold became dangerously severe. 8 hours divided into thirds meant that beds were always occupied. This allowed for continuous use, especially in warmer areas, with different individuals sleeping in them in a rotating pattern around the clock. As one person got up to start their day, another would quickly settle into the cozy, warm sheets. It felt odd to sleep in the Lord's daughter's bed while she was at her lessons, remembers a servant girl from that time. Even stranger was the thought that when I got up, the cook's boy would take my place. But this setup helped us survive. It broke usual social rules and hygiene norms, but it made the most of the few warm sleeping spots we had. Body heat was a valuable resource not to be squandered on unoccupied beds during the coldest times. Even more extreme were the special warm rooms, where the temperature was kept at livable levels no matter what, while the rest of the castle was left to the chill. The South Solar is now the warm room, the steward announces, with all fuel directed there. People not on essential duty will stay there when they're not working. These cozy rooms acted like community lifeboats, safe havens for those most in need when things got dangerous outside. Unlike today's warming centers that usually open only during the day, castle warm rooms often stayed open around the clock during severe weather. We maintained warmth in the Solar for 11 days straight. Shares a proud steward after a harsh cold snap, using every bit of wood available but losing not a single person to the cold, thank goodness. It took a lot of effort to keep these areas warm, with servants working in shifts to keep the fires going. Valuable fuel was set aside from other needs, and tapestries, screens, and makeshift barriers were put up to keep the heat in. These rooms were all about handling tough times in the medieval era. When fuel ran out completely, people in the castle turned to a method known as the living circle, which relied on sharing body heat to survive. A survivor from that time recalls how everyone, young and old, noble and common, would sit together day and night, back to back and side to side, shifting positions every hour to keep warm, taking turns to talk and stay awake, hoping for help from Thor. This practice involved many people sitting closely together to share body heat, serving as a last resort against severe cold when other methods didn't work. Archaeological findings indicate that this was a common occurrence. Various medieval sites display distinct wear patterns on floor stones, which align with large groups sitting in circular arrangements during times of extreme weather. As our castle faces the challenges of winter, we witness a series of actions taken one after another, starting with gathering resources and rationing, moving to creative fuel solutions, and finally adjusting our way of life to focus on survival together rather than personal ease or rank. In her diary, a tired lady-in-waiting notes that for 3 weeks now, Lady Anne has been sitting closely with the kitchen maids. Lord William also helps with the fire, just like any ordinary person. The chaplain mentions that God is showing us humility. If that's the case, we've grasped the lesson. The crisis showed us how delicate yet strong life in a medieval castle can be. The stone fortresses stood strong against enemies, but winter's harshness revealed their weaknesses. Inside, the communities crafted clever ways to survive, blending physical, social, and mental strategies. When the long winter of 1395 finally eased, those who lived in the castles came out transformed by their struggles. The social walls that had been lowered during tough times never fully went back to how they were before. Survival knowledge, shared among everyone, became part of the castle's common understanding, and the memory of how close they had come to disaster brought a new respect for winter's strength. The steward promises, with notes for the coming year, that they will never enter November without enough firewood. The cold is a more dangerous foe than any army. This valuable knowledge would be shared through the years, becoming part of the castle's traditions and routines. The harsh winter had imparted lessons that would shape life in the castle for many years. As the first real spring day arrives, bringing warmth that seeps through the sturdy stone walls, the castle community steps out of survival mode. The closed-off areas are now open again, tidy and fixed up. The animals find their way back to their usual spots outside the homes. The food distribution rules are slowly eased. On the first day, without frost on the inner walls, a servant notes with deep relief, "Maybe we will see summer after all." This careful hope shows how people in medieval times viewed seasonal changes, never assuming they would survive, always mindful that nature could strike back with harsh consequences. The lessons learned during harsh winter crises gradually led to improved heating technologies, better insulation, and more efficient fuel use over the centuries. The creative solutions of medieval castle residents laid the groundwork for innovations that would make surviving winter easier for future generations. However, for those who experienced these challenges, the knowledge was deeply personal and urgent. They endured the harshest winter and made it through by preparing, adapting, and sticking together. Their stories show a different side of life in a medieval castle, where the real enemy wasn't another army or a scheming rival, but the quiet, relentless cold that affected everyone, no matter their status. As we step out of the castle after facing winter's challenges, we can think about what these survival strategies reveal about the values, creativity, and strength of people in medieval times. The strategies they created, like four-poster beds, fuel rationing, and social changes, were clever ways to deal with environmental challenges that pushed human endurance. Their fight against the cold influenced not only how they survived winter, but also how they designed, built, and organized their lives throughout the year. The impact of that struggle is still visible in the architecture, technology, and cultural practices that grew from their hard-earned lessons. The sun rises over the castle walls. Light glimmers on the frost-covered stone, making the battlements look like sparkling crystals. After a long, cold winter, the first signs of spring bring a gentle warmth to the air. A night watchman, wrapping up his shift, stops to face the rising sun. He whispers, having made it through another winter, a hint of awe in his tone. This straightforward remark holds more significance than many today might realize. Surviving winter in a medieval castle was no small feat. It was a real challenge, often a daily struggle against a harsh enemy that took many lives each year. They didn't simply get through winter, a medieval historian once shared with me, while warming her hands around a mug of coffee in her cozy office. They fought against it using every method they could find, always remembering those who didn't make it. The strategies we've looked at during our journey, from four-poster beds with their clever curtains, to shared sleeping spaces for servants, and the extreme measures taken during severe weather, were not just fascinating bits of history. They were essential survival techniques shaped by generations of experience and sometimes dire outcomes. The historian shared that in particularly harsh winters, deaths in medieval castles could be as high as 5 to 10% of the household, especially among the elderly and very young. Those with better heating methods experienced fewer losses. Each death led to changes in survival strategies, adjustments in protocols, and new ideas for heating and insulation. Medieval people actively tackled the challenges of their environment, continuously finding ways to adapt and survive. An example of this adaptive innovation is the evolution of the bed warmer. In early medieval times, nobles used heated stones wrapped in cloth, which were effective but risky, as they could easily cause burns or fires. By the late medieval period, warming pans were created with long handles for safety and perforated lids to keep bedding from scorching. An architectural historian guided me through a restored castle bedroom, explaining that while they lacked our technology, they possessed centuries of practical knowledge about heat transfer, insulation, and thermal efficiency. They simply thought about it differently. This understanding influenced not only how they survived winter, but also the entire design of medieval castles. The placement of kitchens, the arrangement of sleeping quarters, the thickness of walls, and the size and position of windows all showed lessons learned from experience in managing cold. The historian noted how the servants' quarters were located above the kitchen in this castle. That wasn't just by chance. Heat rises, and the kitchen fires made those rooms a bit warmer than others. Medieval builders learned about thermal dynamics from experience, not formulas. This practical knowledge also applied to clothing. Even without today's knowledge of microfibers and thermal layers, people in medieval times created clever clothing systems to stay warm. Take a look at these illuminated manuscripts, an expert in medieval textiles pointed out, displaying beautifully detailed images of winter scenes. Notice how the layers function. Linen undergarments to draw away moisture, wool middle layers for warmth, and a heavier outer layer of wool or fur to shield against the wind. It's quite similar to today's outdoor gear ideas. What's interesting is how these survival methods varied based on social class. The options for nobles, like four-poster beds, warming pans, and private rooms with their own fires, offered a unique winter experience. The ways servants managed, sleeping together, finding spots close to warmth, and sharing body heat, created a different reality. Winter felt different for everyone in the castle. as a social historian pointed out. It wasn't even the same danger. For a well-fed noble with plenty of fuel and cozy bedding, winter was mostly just an annoyance. For an elderly servant with little food and no personal heat, it could be deadly. This difference in how winter was experienced was highlighted by the social structure of life in a medieval castle. Having warmth was as important as having food or money. Interestingly, during severe winter crises, these differences sometimes disappeared, leading people to work together for survival. There are intriguing stories of winter emergencies where usual social rules didn't apply, as noted by the social historian. Lords and servants coming together to collect fuel, nobles and commoners sharing sleeping areas, food given out based on need instead of status. These moments were often seen as unusual, but they show the adaptability within what appeared to be strict social structures. This adaptability, the capacity to adjust both physically and socially to tough situations, was likely the key survival skill in medieval times. When usual methods didn't work and traditional structures fell short, medieval castle communities could change their setup for a while to focus on survival together. They were often more flexible than we are today, according to an expert in disaster management who looks at how people responded to tough situations in the past. Our modern comforts have made us less able to handle discomfort. We look for steady temperatures, personal sleeping areas, and endless hot water. People in medieval times didn't have these expectations and could adapt more easily when things got tough. This flexibility also applied to their mental approaches. In medieval times, preparing for winter involved more than just gathering supplies. It also meant engaging in rituals, prayers, and community activities to keep spirits high during the cold, dark months. Winter posed both physical and mental challenges. As a historian of medieval religion noted, the unique prayers, festive days throughout the season, and the tradition of sharing stories by the fire were not merely cultural customs. They served as vital tools for psychological endurance, helping to foster meaning and hope during the toughest time of the year. Many of these psychological tools are still around today, though they may not be linked to their original purpose. Our customs of celebrating holidays in winter, sharing stories by the fire, and observing the winter solstice all trace back to medieval practices that emerged as ways to cope with the difficulties of winter. Your Christmas tree, festive meals, and even hanging stockings all have ties to rituals focused on surviving the winter, as noted by the religion historian. There were methods to bring light, warmth, and plenty during the dark and scarce season. The traditions of surviving winter in medieval times go deeper than just these practices. A lot of our current comforts and technologies trace back to those early battles with the cold. Home heating has come a long way, starting from open hearths to more efficient fireplaces with chimneys, then moving on to stoves, furnaces, and finally central heating. This journey began with medieval innovations aimed at maximizing warmth while using less fuel. The shift from central hearths to wall fireplaces was a game changer, as it allowed heat to be focused into the room instead of just escaping upwards. The fundamental idea that heat needs to be managed and guided is the foundation of all contemporary heating systems. In the same way, our current beds, focusing on insulation and heat retention, have developed from the medieval styles we've looked at, like curtained four-poster beds, elevated platforms, and layered bedding. While memory foam and electric blankets may appear quite different from heated stones and bed curtains, a historian of domestic life noted that they serve the same purpose, crafting a cozy sleeping environment that is warmer than the surrounding room temperature. Our modern buildings, focused on insulation and energy efficiency, still learn from medieval practices of heat management. The thick stone walls of castles, which kept them cold, also provided important insights into thermal mass and heat retention that shape architectural design today. Builders from the medieval era understood that thick walls would cool and heat at a slow pace. As explained by the architectural historian, castle walls were often draped with tapestries, serving not only as decoration but also for insulation. The idea of trapping heat with layers of material is key to how we insulate buildings today. It's fascinating to see how these medieval survival techniques developed without the benefit of our current scientific understanding. People living in medieval castles didn't grasp the science behind heat transfer or hypothermia. Instead, they learned to survive by watching, experiencing, and relying on the knowledge passed down through generations who had encountered similar struggles. They understood that body heat could warm a cozy space, like a bed with curtains, as noted by the domestic historian. They didn't have to grasp convection currents or heat radiation to benefit from that fact. Their understanding was hands-on instead of theoretical, yet just as clever. This practical knowledge was shared through generations, polished and adjusted as necessary. It created a sort of practical understanding of winter survival that was just as important even without formal scientific terms. Medieval people weren't uninformed, the historian pointed out. They had a deep awareness of their surroundings and the skills needed to thrive in them. They simply organized and shared their knowledge in a different way than we do now. When we think about how people in medieval castles survived the winter, we can see what lessons their experiences might offer us. It's not about needing to sleep in fancy beds or crowd together for warmth, but rather how they faced environmental challenges that can still teach us today. They grasped the limits of resources in ways we are just starting to understand again. As noted by an environmental historian, they understood that fuel was valuable, that heat should be used wisely, and that sharing body heat was better than keeping it to oneself. These ideas aren't just from the past. They are lessons we may need to remember as we deal with our own environmental issues. In fact, some modern environmental designers are looking back at old methods of heating and cooling for inspiration. The ideas behind passive solar heating, thermal mass, and natural ventilation in sustainable architecture today can be seen in medieval design. Modern green building practices often resemble those from medieval times, not due to being outdated, but because they embrace natural processes instead of relying heavily on technology. Likewise, the ways medieval communities adapted during winter emergencies, focusing on collective well-being, sharing resources as needed, and temporarily reducing hierarchies, provide useful examples for responding to crises that still apply today. We can learn from how these communities adapted during tough times. The disaster management experts noted, while we shouldn't idealize the past, medieval crisis management was often tough and unfair by today's standards. It's clear that being socially flexible is just as crucial as having technical solutions when dealing with environmental issues. As we finish our exploration of medieval winter nights, we can see these castle inhabitants not just as figures from history, but as people who face challenges that many of us today might not understand in our comfortable lives. Their creativity, ability to adjust, and strength in the face of overwhelming conditions deserve our admiration and consideration. The night watchman on the castle wall turns his face to the spring sun after months of cold. He's not just a figure from the past. He shows how people can endure and adapt to tough conditions. His quiet statement, having made it through another winter, reflects the hard work and community effort that made survival possible. As you lie in your bed tonight, warm and comfortable in ways those medieval castle dwellers could hardly picture, think about the difference between your cozy room and theirs, with your controlled temperature, engineered mattress, and well-designed bedding. The comforts we enjoy today would have felt like magic to those from the past. Picture the Lord in his cozy bed, the servants gathered by the kitchen fire, and the night watchman stamping his feet against the cold. The gap between their lives and ours isn't just about time. It's about how much our expectations have changed. For us, warmth is no longer a struggle. It's just what we expect indoors. Still, there's a thread that ties us to those medieval sleepers, the joy of warmth after a chill, the safety of a good night's rest, and the simple thankfulness for making it through another day. These experiences connect us to our ancestors who rested in stone chambers, with frost on the walls. As you drift towards sleep, think of the medieval castle dwellers who created four-poster beds and warming pans, huddling together for warmth. They faced challenges that many of us will never know. They were people like us, seeking comfort and safety in a tough world. Their battles against the cold led to the cozy lives we enjoy today. Their innovations shaped our modern comforts, and their practical knowledge built the foundations for the scientific understandings we now overlook. We sleep warm tonight because others fought for that warmth in their stone chambers. We benefit from the wisdom gathered over many winters, small changes that turned sleep from a struggle against the cold into the cozy experience we know today. As you sink into your bed, feeling its warmth, take a moment to think of those medieval sleepers, the lord and lady in their curtained bed, the servants by the kitchen fire, the night watchman finally warming up after hours in the cold. They endured their winters, paving the way for a world where we seldom worry about facing ours. The night watchman, still facing the brightening spring sun, steps down from the wall. His shift has ended, and the harsh winter has finally eased. Soon the castle will buzz with daytime activities, but for now, a calm stillness rests over the stone walls. He walks into the kitchen, where the first fires are starting to glow. The warmth wraps around him as he steps inside, a nice comfort after months of harsh cold. Other servants nod at him, their faces reflecting the same quiet relief he experiences. They've made it through another winter. Not everyone was so lucky, but they're here, warming their hands by the fire, ready to start a new day. Their medieval world, filled with challenges and social ranks, its cold stone and fragile existence, feels far from our cozy modern lives. Yet through the ages, there's a thread that links us to these people who battled the cold with every method they could think of. The need for warmth and safety, the cleverness that turns harsh places into cozy homes, the knowledge shared through generations that changes how we live and rest. As you settle into your snug bed, that bond gives you a comforting thought to take into your dreams. The journey from chilly castle rooms to your bedroom tonight shows our strength, our ability to change our surroundings, and our drive to find warmth even in the coldest times. And maybe that's something to keep in mind, something to value, as you settle into the warmth that those who lived in medieval castles worked hard to build against the chill. Sleep well, you've deserved it, just like they did after surviving another winter.